Well, hey, Aaron. Hey, Lily. Welcome back. The topic tonight is education.
Hey everyone, welcome to XYZ Storytellers, a platform started by three people across generations X, Y, and Z, engaging in conversations in the spirit of increased empathy and understanding.
Hi, I'm Erin, the millennial traveler and author. I'm an empath with a drive for connecting to others. I enjoy singing in the car, eating pints of ice cream, and hanging out with my cat, Gimbal.
Hey, I'm Rich, the graybeard Gen Xer with 30 years in conference rooms or airplanes around the globe. I've also been a Little League coach and a family bus driver. This podcast is a way for me to have the types of conversations that just don't happen enough in my day-to-day life.
And me, I'm Lily. I've always been very opinionated and I speak passionately about things no matter who I might be with at the time. I'm here to share my thoughts and get the perspectives of two other generations so I can grow and expand my understanding of the world around me.
With XYZ Storytellers, our conversations aren't meant to be political, social, or even related to current events. We are just recording authentic conversations on a variety of topics, hoping they will resonate in some small way. Thanks for listening.
I think one of the things I've heard feedback that people like about our podcast is we keep it simple. We start with the topic and we let the conversation go wherever it goes. So, all right. So education. So for me, I guess when I thought of it a couple of ways, what education meant to me, and then also where it sits today. I think when I think of education right now, it's with regards to my kids and college and where getting a college degree fits into the grand scheme of things. I think my generation, we were told, get a college education. The only way you'll be successful, the only way you'll be secure is if you have a college education. And I think that was the bill of goods we all bought, right? And we were the early edge of that mindset, and we were the early edge of needing student loans to get a college degree. So the other dimension on this that I thought could be something to chat about, and then I'll let you ladies take it from there, is education. Do you really need to know what happened on June 2nd, 1825? Or is it more important for you to know how to balance a checkbook, how to get a job or navigate a job search, how to communicate effectively through email, all those different things, life skills. So I think education's evolved to a point where it's not just about teaching everybody the 1, 2, 3s and the ABCs, and then because at this point, a lot of what gets taught is an extension of what was taught 150, 200 years ago. So maybe it has to evolve as kids get more savvy when they come into the school. So I'll leave it to one of you to take it to whatever direction you want to take it.
Okay, I actually have something to say first, which is shocking. So what you were saying about like balancing a checkbook and learning stuff that will actually help you in the future, whether it be finances or buying a home or starting a business. I definitely think it's changed because I hear you talk about sometimes how when you were younger that all they taught was history, math, science, and English, and then you moved on and then that was it. But at my school, we get the chance to learn about financial literacy and global marketing and global business and business marketing and all these businesses. And like, I don't know, I feel like in that way, the school board and the education system has changed because there's so many opportunities for me to learn how to do taxes and how to be financially stable when I'm older and out of college. And I think in that regard, it's definitely changed and it's helped us a lot. And I'm happy that I have the opportunity to do that.
Is that something that happens because we're in Hebron, a relatively affluent community, or is that something that's mandated by the state of Texas?
No, I don't think it's just Hebron. I'm not sure, but I'm almost sure that it's like a class now. Like classes are getting more common where it's like financial and home owning and business marketing and everything like that. Like I think it's definitely getting more mainstream for kids to learn about
Okay.
life.
So is it a more kind of refined version of home ec?
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Like a more useful version of home ec in my mind, because I didn't really feel like I needed to learn how to sew or cook to survive, but that was also
Yeah.
Yeah.
Home ec isn't mandatory. I don't even know if it's a class anymore. I think it's just food. It's like a cooking class, and then everything else is separate. Like they just separate everything else that you need to learn. And they're not mandatory either. Like you don't have to take these classes if you don't want to, but if you do want to, they're always available, which I think is very helpful.
Yes, I took personal finance and we played the stock market game. I won by a landslide, but I couldn't tell you how. Like I just got away with clicking a bunch of buttons and kind of gambling on it, and it worked. But
You'd be
to that
surprised
point-
how many people make a living just pushing buttons and gambling. That's all
Yeah.
the stock market. At some levels, that's all the stock market is a bit of gambling and some informed decision making. And just like you look at teams and injuries and all that stuff to figure out what your sports bet might be, you kind of, and I think what's been interesting is it's kind of like there's these two different things that have happened, right? There's what do you need to know from a research perspective to do some of these things, and how easy is it, or this way, right? How much do you need to know, and how easy is it to actually do it? And I think technology has made things better on two sides. It's easy to do the research that you need to do, or you can click on how to or whatever. And then on the other side, you could trade stocks with an app, and you click a few buttons and link it to your account, and all of a sudden you're moving money out of your checking account into the stock market and doing all these things. All of those used to be barriers where there was you had to go find a stockbroker. So then just people to be in the stock market needed a level of savvy and a level of connectedness to whatever, business network they needed to be able to figure out how best to invest in stocks, right? So a lot of people, it wasn't accessible. So maybe it's interesting. I hadn't considered the technology, or even just knowing that what the stock market is and what trading on the stock market means. You can take a stock market app and it could be almost exactly the same thing as what the real world is. Bentley, where I went to school, was one of the I don't know if it still is or not, but it has a trading floor on campus. And it's one of the only ones at the time when it was first built out. It's one of the only ones in the country where you could make trades that were real-time simulations of what the actual prices were in the real market. And so you could be a finance major at Bentley, and you could go and manage a portfolio of products, and you could have to do research and make decisions. And if there were things happening in the market that day that caused a particular stock to go up or down and you owned it, your portfolio in this play model would and back in the day when they first built it, that took a ton of bandwidth, to be able to do that, right? Technology and cost. Now, I would imagine there's probably an app out there that you could almost simulate reality 100%.
Well, and I think what's interesting is the fact that you do bring up technology, because that's part of the reason that I feel like I wasn't so keen on memorizing, which I've never been one for rote memorization. I don't love having to memorize names and dates and locations. History was not my favorite because it just felt like I was memorizing a bunch of stuff. It wasn't. Social history was much more fascinating to me because it was the why behind it and the how do we continue moving forward. And it was the analysis of societal behaviors more so than it was dates and battles and whatever. But I think what's interesting is the fact that at one point I started to ask myself, like, why do I not remember any of this information that is date specific or location specific? And I think part of the reason is because I've grown up with Google, or at least Ask Jeeves. I mean, that was around.
Oh, did you just say Ask Jeeves?
I did. I don't know when did Ask Jeeves die?
I don't know, but
I don't know
But
Yeah,
I'm old
see,
enough to know what apps
Lily doesn't know what it is, and I know it's something that came and went.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the first search engines that I think I remember using. But at least I had some source of education beyond school. Like I could go and Google any question that I had. And so what was the point of memorizing? What was the point of storing some information that is constantly available out on the internet if I'm not going to need it on a regular basis? And so for me, especially looking back, I think education is important because it helps you figure out how to be resourceful, what sources to trust, how to put the pieces together and kind of have an analysis of it. But as far as the specific bland information goes, I think it's becoming more and more irrelevant because we have the answers at our fingertips. And so I think that as technology does adapt and become more efficient, I think our education system has to kind of meet that. And it has in some ways, but I don't know, Lily, if you still feel like it's just kind of rote memorization for things that you could easily look up on the internet. Not to say that some things aren't worth memorizing, but I think education is much more, or should be much more, about how we think and learning how to learn rather than memorizing facts.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I also don't like history. Not because I think it's interesting and I like hearing my teacher talk about what's happened, but I don't enjoy the part where we get quizzed on dates and who did what and what battle happened where and who won the battle. Like, I just don't think that that's what's important. And I know it's part of the education system, but I don't think that memorizing dates and names is going to help you at any point in the future. I think it's more about how we can move on and how we can prevent the things from happening again. And I don't know, I just don't think.
I get that, and I can see where that would come from, so it's not a point of criticism from me, but I, as you're sitting here talking about it, the idea of like outsourcing our memory to the cloud, right? I mean, why do I need to know all these things if it's all right there in Wikipedia? But I will offer,
although Wikipedia is not a reliable source, Rich.
Maybe it's not. So here's the thing, right? To the extent that information gathering and information access has been democratized, and the ability to spread misinformation. I mean, look at what we're dealing with around the election and all those different things that people use Facebook to spin a tale that helped Trump get elected, right? So there is an element of, if it's so easy to put in place, it's easy to manipulate. And what's the risk of that versus if there's, a lot of work and effort to get something published as a definitive thing that's going to be taught in our school system, that maybe, that's not a bad thing, that the information is there and is static. At the same time, we can say that there's a lot of things in history that have been washed over, where we didn't really, we were spun a tale as kids growing up about different things, and we realized, wait a minute, it wasn't always sunshine and roses when you think about different holidays, right? And I don't want to get political, but the thing that struck me, I have a conversation with my other daughter, Rebecca, and she would, maybe have a test that didn't go well, or any of my kids, or any kid that is coming up in college or high school. And I said, well, what do you think happened? I don't know. I thought I knew this, but I didn't. And it's like, well, when your teacher was explaining it to you, maybe you understood it, but until you spend time with it and study it, you don't really know it. And where I'm going with this is this notion of you're doomed to repeat history if you forget it, right? If there's certain things that you don't know intuitively or you don't recall, knowing that you can look it up doesn't help you in the conversation that you're having right now. So if you're not well versed in history, or we didn't all have the same history lesson and learn it to the same level, and we wanted to have a conversation about something, and we said, well, but don't forget, in X, back then, this was this, and you're like, yeah, I guess you're right. The the fact that we can all access Google or whatever real time is good if we're being quizzed, but it's not a good thing if we don't all have that knowledge as a given baseline that we can all now have a conversation. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people where I've made a reference and then they've gone, well, I wouldn't know that. I don't remember that. And they'd go, well, if you say so, or they go, well, I don't believe that to be true. It's like, well, how do you debate that if nobody has anything in common as far as frames of reference go? It makes debating kind of difficult because I know it when I need it for the test, but I don't recall it for any kind of intellectual conversation. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being.
No, I think you make a very good point, actually. Like, having the resource doesn't mean that it's going to be meaningful when the time comes, because you're going to have to stop a debate and go, wait, I need 20 minutes to research this and figure out both sides. And you're absolutely right in that. The thing that I would say is that was complex about what you said is that to make it more difficult to have a text in a classroom, to make it more, I guess, official or standard. I think just as we're seeing manipulation of information online, we're also seeing manipulation of information in textbooks.
No, you're right.
And so that's the scary thing, is it's like we have, and that's where my mind went when you said that. It's like, yeah, we have fake news in journalism, but we also have fake news in the classrooms, or news that is becoming like textbooks that are becoming politicized to the point where students are answering questions based on politics that have nothing to do with the concept they're learning, but they just happen to slip a little side note in there for students who are learning that. And so I don't think we're safe anywhere in terms of information manipulation. But I think that's why media literacy is so important. And that's something that when I realized my brother's class, who's 3 or 4 years younger, was not learning that, I was a little devastated, because he was the one who came to me and said, oh my gosh, they're making a Grand Theft Auto version of Pokemon Go. The game where you like walk around and hunt Pokemons. Well, he came running into the living room and was like, they're going to have a real life version of Grand Theft Auto where you actually have to like steal cars and drive around. And like, okay, there's no way that they would do that. I was like, what's your source? And he's like, it's on iFunny. I was like, iFunny is a parody site. It is not a real thing. And he was all worked up because he really seriously thought that someone was creating a live version of Grand Theft Auto. And media literacy is not being taught the way that it was when I was in school, but I didn't even get it to the degree that I should have.
Right.
Knowing what a reliable source is and being able to do the research behind where the information is coming from and whether or not it's coming from biased sources is so important for both the classroom and the internet. But I'm not sure how much media literacy is going on as much as just here's how to put together a biography or a bibliography. There we go. My mouth. Right. It's late.
Lily, what do you think about, did the election last year and all the stuff around the bots and the Facebooks, did that kind of cause you and your age group to kind of take a step back and realize just because I see it here doesn't mean it's real? Or
I don't know. I think that since my generation and my age group has grown up with news sources and news apps and news websites and all these people publishing stories trying to get their opinion out as fast as they can, we've grown up with the message we've had many assemblies about internet and internet safety, and I feel like we've just gotten the message pushed in our head that not everything on the internet is real, so much that we read everything on the internet, but we don't necessarily take everything so seriously as older generations who have to vote would. Because, well, number one, because we don't have to vote yet, so we're not as interested as we would be if we were 18. But right. Also because we want to form our own opinions, and so reading something from the internet, it's like interesting to read, but at the same time, I know what I think, and if this person is telling me something completely different, I'm most likely not gonna take it completely seriously. So I just feel like that's a difference, because we just, I don't know how to explain it. Like, we just don't take everything so seriously on the internet.
Well, because I was even looking at this post popped up, and it was like a list of celebrity accomplishments. It was a list of celebrities, and then it was, it was basically a message of whatever you're doing today is okay. Like so and so didn't make it to fame until they were so many years old. At this age, this celebrity was broke, living in a dungy 2-bedroom apartment or something like, and it listed all these celebrities and their ages and different stages of their life where they were really struggling. And I read it and I thought, that is so inspiring. It's uplifting, it's encouraging, because I feel like I have to have it all now and I don't. And I was about to share it, and then I was like, I don't even know if this is true. Like, I don't know if these celebrities have ever struggled in their life. I can't vouch for the reliability of these facts. And so I didn't end up posting it. But even something as simple as that, I was hyper aware of the fact that if someone knew for a fact that that post wasn't true, and they commented and were like, well, you didn't research this before you shared it. How can you go and say, oh, this is so inspiring if you haven't even validated that it's true?
Well, and that's fair, but if you put that disclaimer out there, you could have posted it and said, hey, I can't say for sure whether every one of these things is literally correct. And
I almost did that. I was so close.
but the message of everyone has their own path in life. Don't get discouraged no matter where you're at. There's always opportunity, right? I mean,
Right.
I had a conversation with someone just the other day, and I said, if you look at someone like Greta Thunberg,
I think, yeah.
she's 16.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's say that she really, came online as a thinking person 5 years ago. And then you look at someone who, let's say I'm gonna live till I'm 80. Okay, I'm 53. She's made an impact in the first 16 years of her life. So what's to say that the fact that I'm starting at 50 doesn't mean that somewhere along the line, by the time I'm 65, I'm not having a big impact on the world.
Mm.
So it's not when you start, it's not where you start, it's that you start, and the education piece, and it's all there. It's easier to get information, and you look at any place around the world, access to you used to need to be able to access books, and you couldn't get books into different places where there were third world countries or whatever. And the wild card is the internet. It used to be you needed a phone and electricity. And now you've got these solar capabilities and all these different things. And you've got people that live in places that has no real infrastructure, but they managed instead of putting a phone system in place, they put a cell tower. And now you have the ability to connect to the cell tower, which gets you to the internet. And you have a solar generator or whatever that gets you. All of a sudden now you've got as quick an access to the internet and everything that's on it as anybody. So I think there's definitely there's more access to the information. But let's take this in a slightly different direction. How important is it to go to college?
It's so funny story about that. I was talking to my uncle the other day, and he was telling me that we explained to him what Twitch was, which is a live streaming platform primarily used by gamers. And my uncle was like, yeah, my coworker has a son who's in high school, and he is super into video games. He's practically professional. And his coworker has a PhD. I mean, she's been highly educated for her entire life. And she's like, I think my son's just going to skip college and play video games and become a professional gamer. And she was like, we support him. And my uncle was shocked, because here's this woman with a prestigious education with a son who is pursuing professional video games, which is a very lucrative business if you can manage to do it well.
Some kid won $3 million recently in a what's the game, Lily?
Is it Fortnite?
Fortnite.
Yeah, that's what this kid wants to do. He wants to just not go to school and play video games professionally, and particularly play Fortnite. I was just kind of like, so is college important in today's world?
Oh.
My argument is that if you're able to make a living and you have other resources for creating a stable environment for yourself, then I really don't think the piece of paper makes a difference. I mean, I am grateful for my education. My degree means a lot to me, not only because I had the opportunity to have that kind of academic setting, but I also was able to study abroad and had different internship opportunities that really created the person that I am today. So that degree for me is so much more than just I sat in a classroom for so many hours and took tests. It was I became involved in a community and had this environment in which furthering my education was encouraged. So it wasn't just about the classroom work, it was beyond. But in all reality, how much I'm using my degree right now, I couldn't tell you. I switched majors 3 or 4 times, so I have a couple different things under my plate. I've got a little bit of journalism here, I've got a little bit of business, a little bit of digital media. But in all reality, if I hadn't gone to college, I could have learned this stuff on my own. I think what college provided primarily was that environment to connect with other people who are pursuing creative arts and to help network my abilities to then grow and develop what I was doing. If that makes any sense.
No, I think that's fair. I think what it also provides is a bit of an environment that you're able to live outside of your parents' purview, but you have a buffer of 4 years to figure it out, right? So, because not every 18-year-old, no matter how smart, is ready to live on their own, but becoming a gamer and still living in your parents' basement, that doesn't necessarily, not every model works.
$3 million and then you're set. If you have 3 million, you're good.
That's fair, but I'm just saying, there's an aspect of it that says, look, you need to be able to step out on your own, even in a protected environment like a college campus. And you need to, we've deferred. So it used to be you could make mistakes and learn in high school. We've created such a bubble in high school, or at least we perceive it that way, right? I mean, what goes on in social media is a wild, wild west for a lot of parents. But, the idea that every parent would be dropping their kid off to school as a high school kid, I mean, by the time I got done, when I was going to high school, it was like catch the bus or walk to school. Now, parents are like, well, no, I got to make sure they get it to the door, and then I'll be right there when they come out. There's still there's a protected, so there's kind of this weird dichotomy of protective parent, protective child, and when do you really learn to become an adult and stand on your own 2 feet? And now that happens in college. And to your point, though, that's more important, I think, than the degree, is learning how to become a responsible member of a community and your own person. I don't know, Lily, what do you think?
I think that people nowadays, or most of the people that I've seen on the internet, which I know we just talked about, but I just see all these like tweets and Instagram posts about how people really don't even want to go to college to get a degree to be able to find a job, because nowadays it's so hard to find a job, even if you do have a degree, because 10 million other people have the same degree as you. They really just go for like the college experience of living in a dorm and having a roommate and going to game days and, oh my gosh, I have like 3 essays due tonight. Like they really I just see so many people that don't even go for the education or like what they want to do, because they don't even know what they want to do, but more for what you said, like becoming more independent, but still in like an environment where you can go home if you want. And so I think that people are becoming more lenient in like the demand for a college education, because I know when you were a kid or whenever you were ready to go to college, that was like it. Like college was in everyone's plan mostly, and college was the staple if you wanted to get a job. And I just think it's changed a lot to where you don't even need a college education to get a stable job to help you live a life.
Well, and I'm not saying I actively looked at different. I think the view of going into a trade versus going to college was definitely different when I was coming out. It was definitely biased towards, more often than not, people went to college, and if they didn't go to college, it was because they couldn't. And if you couldn't go to college, then you had to get a job in a trade, or you had to go into the military. And I think it's evolved now more into, and there's still a little bit of that where people like the military is where you go if you didn't pay attention for 12 years of school, and you decided, I don't want to work at McDonald's, I'm going to go into the military. There's an element of that, right? But there's also an element of people who, like our son, Matthew, he didn't end up going in, but he dreamed about being in the military. He wanted to serve his country. So, I'm not going to paint everybody the same in the military, but I will tell you though, going into the military now and the honor and the respect that's given to that is greater now than it was before 9/11. Coming out of the Vietnam era and up till 9/11, choosing to go into the military had its own different perspective, especially in the, and for me in the 70s and the early 80s, it was still the hangover of all the different protests and people getting spit on, and that was still relatively fresh when they came back from Vietnam and they were on their flight back from being discharged, and they come back and you had to wear your uniform until you got home, and people were spitting on people in the airport because they viewed them as being criminals. And so there's, so being in the military wasn't the same, but also trade, right? Why did you go into a trade? Well, because I wasn't smart enough to get good grades in French, English, and German. Or could have just been, I never really had an interest in the book. I really like working on cars. But the perception was college was what you needed to get. And I think there's a lot of people that went to college that probably, had they had to do it over again, wouldn't go. And I know, Aaron, in your generation, the idea that take out loans, they'll pay for themselves, whatever you got to do. And then you had college lenders. It used to be that, okay, well, you get 40% grants and 60% loans, and loans were much more favorable interest rates, and you had deferral and all that stuff. Now they opened it up to be a free market thing. Now there's people, they'll sign anybody up for a loan, no matter what school they go to, and interest starts accruing the minute you get paid. And there's no deferral until you graduate. For me, the interest didn't start till 6 months after I graduated. And that was on every bit of my loan, the loan for my first semester freshman year, all the way to the loan for my second semester senior year. I didn't accrue a lick of interest until I was 6 months post-graduation.
Well, and that's part of the big pushback against education, is the fact that we are being robbed. And we should not have to pay that much money into education for a piece of paper that may or may not be obsolete depending on what kind of career you're going into. Obviously, lawyers, doctors, nursing, anything health related, you probably need a degree. You're not going to even get an interview without that degree.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't even say you definitely need a degree. I don't want to see a doctor that doesn't have degrees, certifications at the wazoo. Like that. You don't want to see
that. You don't want to see the iPad next to the operating table with the Wikipedia entry on how to do.
Nope. But to the same point, I mean, it's ridiculous how expensive education has to be, particularly when, like you said, Lily, a lot of people go for the experience because the thought is that as soon as you graduate high school, you have to have a plan for college, or you have to have a plan of some kind, and most people go towards college. But the reality is they're not necessarily preparing you or exposing you well enough in high school to different industries that you know exactly what you want to do when you go to college. And so, I mean, the percentage of people going in undecided is a significant number. And to that point, then that's just it's not wasted, because they do have a lot of great undecided programs that expose you to different opportunities and different career paths. But that's 2 years of an education that you could be spending truly refining your skills in the area that best interests you. And so, like I said, I mean, I changed majors three, 4 times. And I ended up with the piece of paper that I needed to be legitimized. But in all reality, I haven't even had a quote unquote real job since I graduated, because I've been either freelancing or working at a gym or writing or now self-employed. That degree doesn't mean much to me in terms of the amount that my loans are making it seem like it was worth. And to be strapped down to student debt for 10, sometimes even 20 years, depending on your loan amount and your degree, that is ridiculous. We have enough debt going on as new independent adults, that to be burdened with that after we did what we were supposed to is more a punishment than it is a reward of any kind. And so I think that particularly my generation, and Lily, your generation as well, there's a reality to it that we have to face. It's like, it's stupid to do this. And I think probably 10, even 20 years ago, it was like, yeah, that's a lot of money, but that's just what you do. And now people are looking at the price tag and going, that's just stupid. That's it.
I mean, it took 15 years for me, with the way that life went and everything. It took 15 years for me to pay off the last of my student loans. But my loan payment was not as big as my rent payment. It was, it was like, I think I had a loan payment of about $180 a month, which, back when I came out of college, that wasn't small. But by the time I paid it off, it was minor. And the reason you weren't incented to pay it off early because the interest rate was typically the lowest interest rate of all the different types of credit I had. Take my credit cards and why would I pay off the lowest interest rate first, right? They teach you basic business is pay off your highest interest rates first. So my student loan never hit to the top of the list. So I'd take on debt and pay that off like a car payment. I'd pay off a car loan. I'd bring it in and pay it off long before, and my student loan payment was like just there. It was just part of the equation for 15 years. But even that, there was periods when I had to defer. So, I mean, I felt the early edges of that kind of thing. But then there's also the people that graduated with a philosophy degree and $80,000 in debt. And you're thinking to yourself, what possible thing were you going to do as a philosophy major where you ever felt you could pay off an $80,000 debt? And there's two things that happened, or several things that happened there. One is, as a philosophy major, you're not a business major, so you don't think in those terms. As a child of older school systems, we didn't have what Lily talked about earlier, the financial awareness and what does interest rate do. And then the other was the privatization of student loans, where it was, you could sneeze and somebody would hand you a $20,000 student loan. And so if you're going through college, you don't have any really wherewithal, and you're sitting there going, I got to go to college. How am I going to pay for this? And someone goes, go here, sign up for this. They'll pay for it no matter what. All you have to do is show them your student ID. And I blame the schools, because schools were all too happy to just have people take out loans as long as they knew where that tuition was coming from. But shame on everybody in that school that knew that they had philosophy majors with $80,000 in debt. And your financial aid advisor was nothing more than the same thing as, well, let me get, my manager wants to talk to you about this car and the loan, and I think we can get you, what's it going to take for you to drive off with that car today, right? Financial aid was just an engine to get people to sign up for loans, to keep the cash flow coming in. And I'm sure there were measures of people going, how many new loans did you originate? Because that meant that they were going to be able to get that money coming in. Well, shame on those schools that took people for that ride, because.
Well, that's what my question is like, whose responsibility is it to fix it? Is it us as seeking degree holders to stand our ground and say, we're not going to pay for this? Is it the government to figure out how to better handle the cost of education? Is it the schools themselves? I mean, I went to a private school, so that was completely up to them of how much they wanted to charge. But tuition has gone up several $1,000s, if not tens of thousands, every year, and yet they have these brand new fancy buildings with free arcades for students, brand new rec facility, brand new dorms. Like, they have all of these new fancy things on campus, and yet tuition is still going up. They didn't need those fancy things. It was just a draw to get more attention from students. So, well,
no, but you're right. So they became revenue generating machines, right?
And they have the audacity to ask me to give them money, and I am like, no.
Yeah.
Especially because they won't even acknowledge that my book exists, and that's just a little heartbreaking. Like,
Well, no, I mean, that's fair. And I think that old model still holds true, right? The idea of having your alumni give money back. Back in the day, there was a time when it didn't cost you your left arm to get a degree, and the degree put you in a income level that was far and above what your high school graduate counterparts had. And so the business case was there to say, yeah, I'll donate to my college because you put me in a different sphere. Now, that's just another revenue stream that they figured out how to maximize that, right? And how do we send out all the different things to keep that going? But you said they didn't need that building. Well, yeah, they needed the building, because if they didn't have that rec center, their freshman class would go from 1,000 students a year down to 700. And if they go down below 800, they're losing money. So they got to keep that going. So you almost have to spend to make. But the crazy thing is you look at some of these schools. So everybody goes, oh, what's the tuition to go to Harvard every year? Well, it's $50,000. What's the tuition to go to Ohio State? I don't know, $35,000 if you're out of state. But Ohio State doesn't have the endowment. Harvard has the endowment. Harvard can give grants. So if Harvard can give grants, they could make their $50,000 tuition really be $20,000, because they are able to take and give every student a $30,000 grant right off the top. But what do? That allows them to take money out of their endowment and put it into their operating fund, which then allows them to take that and build building. I mean, there's the rich get richer, and the colleges are part of it. And I agree with you. The way that tuition has gone up relative to the cost of living and or the true value of that has definitely gotten out of whack. But two things happen that I think would be interesting. And Lily, you could tell us what you think as someone who's choosing a college. Now you could go 2 years to a junior college, transfer in, you're still going to get that same degree, even though you're only at that more expensive college for 2 years. That's a model that's evolved in the last decade. Whereas before it was unheard of that you could barely, the idea of transferring from a junior college into one of these named institutions, it was hard to do. But now you're able to do it because why? They need to maintain their student levels. And so those transfer programs are a way for them to deal with the fact that a big chunk of who they got in there as freshmen dropped out. So how do you backfill that? You backfill that with transfers. And then the other is online schools. Even 10 years ago, an online degree was viewed negatively. The idea that someone could go and say, I got a bachelor's degree and I got it from, Phoenix University. Well, 10, 15 years ago, that would have been like, who? And what school you got your degree from would have made a difference in the job pursuit. Whereas for a lot of jobs now, half the people that are getting degrees did it online, which then that somewhat makes college more accessible and affordable for a lot of people. So, I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but it goes back to, from an education perspective, there's no right way to do anything anymore. There's your way. Mm-hmm. Lily, how do you feel about that? I mean, when you
That's
talk
what
to
millennials like to hear. It's your way.
Yeah. Well, but when you talk to your peers, as long as you're willing to work and you know how to learn and you can communicate, you're 80% of the way there.
Mm-hmm.
Lily,
what do you think about the different dynamics in educations for higher learning?
Well, when I was little and we lived in San Antonio, that area, I feel like community and online college was just seen as someone who barely graduated high school, did not do any of their work, didn't even want to go to college, but they just went there just to make their parents happy. Like that was the kind of thing, that was the kind of idea that surrounded community and online college. But now that I'm older, I'm seeing all these people like posting and they're like, a degree is a degree. Like it doesn't matter where you get it. Like they're just trying to encourage people to just do it their own way and not spend tens of thousands of dollars to get the same education that you could get at like Collin College or another community college in the area. Like, community colleges have this big stigma around them, or they used to, that was for lazy people, and I just don't think that's the case anymore. And I think that people have changed their ideals of what a college education looks like, because before, the only college I'd ever heard of was Harvard, Stanford, Princeton. It was like all these big Ivy League schools, and I thought that was all there was. But now that I'm older, there's like tens of thousands of colleges in the United States, and I just realized that an education is an education, and I don't think that you should like stop yourself from going somewhere that you can get through without having hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So I just think a lot more people are becoming more open to more colleges and more options, and I think that that's really helpful for people who don't have the money to go and who don't want to be living in debt for the rest of their lives. I think it's good that there's more options.
I mean, there is an element where the name of the college on your degree gives you access to a network when it comes to your job search, right? So the idea that you've got Texas A&M on your diploma when you submit your resume, it gives you a little bit better chance if you're looking for a job in Texas, that if you have a hiring manager who went to A&M, right? Or if you know someone who's an alumni of A&M and they say, oh, go talk to so-and-so, I think they have a company that's doing, there is a little bit of that network, right? that you can plug into as an alumni of a named institution like Harvard or whatever. Absolutely. And if you want to get a job on Wall Street at one of the large brokerage firms and you want to make $150,000 your first year out of college, that's a Harvard degree or whatever name degree with, getting plugged into JP Morgan or whatever. Chances of some kid from rural Texas getting his online degree and getting a job at JP Morgan is pretty slim. But that doesn't mean you can't support your family or you can't grow and start a career and find your way, to a very comfortable, and even maybe you end up on Wall Street, right? The path is there. But I don't know. I think there's this element. There were two things. I think there's two big frauds that were played on my generation. And the first fraud being is you absolutely need a college degree to be successful. I think that was the number one fraud that a lot of us bought into. And the idea that that's not the case is pretty eye-opening for me at this point in my life, that says, you know what, I didn't need the degree. I see a lot of people who either had the degree and never used it, or other people that never got a degree and are very successful, right? So that's the one fraud. And the second fraud is women entering the workplace. It was kind of this catch-22 or unintended consequence. And bear with me a second, don't lynch me through the phone here. What I mean by that is the idea of the two-income family. Because what the two-income family did for middle-class America is it deferred the pain that everybody's feeling. The fact that this minimum wage has not gone up in as many years as it has, right? People have always been willing to work an extra job to make some extra money. And the idea of working in the home and the idea of taking a job in business and making money, that was a good thing. I don't get me wrong. But it softened the blow that now you have two parents working a job and a half each, and they're barely getting by now. And so now the whole uproar, and what's happened is it's pushed it down to a level now where wages are at a point where you have a lot of people that are working hard and they're struggling to survive, and it's all coming to roost now. It can't get pushed down any lower. It's not humanly possible to work a minimum wage job in some places and actually have a home and all that stuff, right? And so, yes, get a degree. Well, you can't get a degree unless you can get a loan. Well, now you can't get a loan if this, and you're all, there's no more room for this bubble to spread, right? And it's going to burst. I mean, the job market, to your point, Lily, it's hard to get a job. Well, that's because unemployment is as low as it is and everybody's in the market. But somewhere along the line, that's going to break, because if people don't get trained, or if we don't give people money to go in and become apprentices and all this stuff, the aging population is going to age out, and you're not going to be prepared to fill it in the back. And right now, up until now, in the last 10 years, technology has been able to level that playing field. But now we're reaching the outer limits of technology, 2-income families, all these different things are all getting stretched. And now it's a struggle, to your point, Aaron, you know, just to be able to live paycheck to paycheck. You know, that paycheck.
I think it'd be really interesting to see resumes omit college names. If they were to just say, I have a degree in psychology, I have a degree in digital media production, I would be really curious to see how that would affect the educational environment from a higher learning perspective. Because if the name of the college wasn't on the resume, or it was not expected on the resume, or maybe it was even it's getting late, my brain is stopping its function normally. Ouch, I'm broken. If it were like disencouraged to put your college name on a resume, if it were actually not allowed, then maybe that would level the playing field, because then people would be able to go in on merit and not just, well, my parents could pay for this really expensive university, or my test scores got me in, but I partied the whole time, but I still managed to pass well. You know what I mean? So I feel like that would be a really interesting experiment to see if it was actually not allowed to put your university or college title on the resume. But I think there's different responsible parties in terms of, we need to be responsible in not taking on loans that are ridiculous, and recognizing that while college is important, going to the most expensive one that puts us outside of our financial needs will not be the best choice. We need financial advisors who actually have our best interest in mind, but we also need the schools to recognize that just taking in our money and allowing us to put ourselves in this type of debt without really having that much to give back is a problem. But also there's a responsibility on the employers to help level that playing field by saying, we want your merit and your abilities, we don't want your degree.
Yeah, and I see that, but I think there's a certain amount of reality that says, you know, there still can be a difference between different degrees. Mm-hmm. You know, and you
absolutely.
You want to know that you're getting high level candidates as an employer. I'm not, and I might be sounding like I'm contradicting myself a little bit, but I think though the idea that, you know,
well, but see, then that would trickle back to the programs themselves. Mm-hmm. So if you took college names out of it and all degrees were the same, then colleges would likely be willing to put more effort into programs that are not well known for at that university. For example, the psychology program at Butler that's not what they're known for. They're known for dance, business. But if they're focused on, well, this is what we're known for, then all the other degrees, whether they like it or not, are probably being set aside as the smaller groups.
Yeah, but I don't know how you get away from that. I mean, I think you end up with kind of like this.
It's totally an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, there's a bit of a socialistic.
I'd be curious to see what would happen if that one thing were to change.
Yeah. Lily, what about you? Any closing thoughts?
I don't know anything about college. I'm going to be honest with you. So you guys talking about all of this and certain types of degrees and programs and applications, like I like listening to it, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah.
I mean, it's what you want from your education. But you know what you want from an education. Like, you know what your expectations are going into college and what you want out of going to a university. So
She wants to go to Heidelberg University and get her free degree from the German university, which they teach in English, by the way, I found out. They don't teach it in German.
oh, that makes it even easier of a decision. I'm in. I'll go back to school.
Interesting.
I'm lobbying.
Well, now we know where Rich wants Lily to go to school.
Come on. Top degree for free or virtually free?
Free is definitely better. Well, I think this was a very good conversation. I feel like this could be a 4-hour conversation in all reality, because there's so many different aspects to education that both complicates and makes a higher learning much more valuable. So I feel like we could break it down in so many different ways. And I think we touched a little bit on all of the different aspects of it, but I'm sure this could go on for hours if we really wanted to dive in deeper and pull out some facts.
Yeah. Well, and I think that might be something that we look at. I mean, we started out with just an idea and saw where it would take us. And I think we've had some really good conversations. I think, though, that we might look at, okay, is there something we want to do occasionally? Not every time. I mean, we can mix in a little bit of structure, or we could have a guest, you know, someone who you know, is well known, or an expert, or spent a lot of time in a particular, you know, career, or a particular, you know, is knowledgeable on a particular topic, and then see where that conversation goes. And, you know, there's other generations that are out there. We might actually bring someone in from a different generation than X, Y, or Z. We won't say it by name because that's a very touchy topic at this point.
It's taboo.
Okay, boomer. Yeah, apparently that's like yesterday's news, and the boomers are so upset, and the Gen Z people are going, what? We already forgot about that. We've moved on.
We scrolled and it was gone.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. I think, to your point, we could have taken that a lot deeper in a lot of different directions, but it's always good to chat. It might not be apparent on the video when this gets posted, but we just came off of the Thanksgiving week, and that was a nice break for us. I think now, you know, we get our sea legs back under us. We got a couple of weeks before the Christmas holiday that we'll have a couple other recordings that we'll work on, and we'll see where this takes us. But otherwise, Lily, Aaron.
Thank you for talking about that.
All right, hold on one second.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.